I hope you can see my screen, Firefighting of Wildfire. So it's about using flight simulation for training with pilots. Yeah, and of course, the question is all the time, how could we prepare pilots, in this case pilots, to handle this situation with the wildfire? Because as mentioned before, we could not just put some fire in some woods and then do it. Yeah, so there are at least 3 options. The one is to use a real helicopter and to say like, okay, let's imagine there's a fire here. And then let's imagine we want to make it out. But this is, yeah, this is really some effort and some money there, and you cannot do it every time, everywhere. The other thing is, yeah, with a real fire, of course, is the other thing. And the third thing is to use a simulation with a simulated fire, which saves money a lot and is also way more flexible. Day and night, you can train every time. And last but not least, it's also much more safe for people and equipment, because if you handle with real fire, there's all the time a little bit risk in there, even if it's really controlled. The same for real helicopter use. Yeah, usually a helicopter has a line on it and a bucket to transport water to the fire. And usually there's also at least a recommendation from the AMC that helicopter pilots should train this kind of operation, because just flying a helicopter is a little bit different than to operate with sling load, because you have more difficult conditions here. This should also be possible to train in a simulation then. And when you compare also traditional flight simulator, then they have a combined thing of hardware and software. So if you want to certify such a simulation, usually the flight organization, flight organization says that you have to have the hardware which is certified together with the software. But these simulators are big. They are also expensive. They start, for example, at 30,000 euro and way more if you have more complex systems. But a benefit, of course, is you can just sit in and another person can also sit next to you and can join your flight, your simulated flight. Compared to that, you have also the opportunity to use a virtual reality simulator, which is or which can be set up at way less cost, because you do not have all the hardware around it. It's more or less just your headset, some controllers in it, and a seat and a computer. This also means it's very mobile, so you can easily put it into your car and transport to some other location. Another benefit is it's also possible to switch the aircraft. For example, you can, instead of using a helicopter A-Star, you can use a Super Puma helicopter as well with the same hardware. And another benefit to compared to the traditional simulation is you have also a 3D outside view, which is not that important for commercial line pilots. But for pilots who are close to the ground, it's much more interesting. And yeah, you can of course also see the last point is it's also not too complicated to say, okay, we want also to place a kind of view camera or something on the ground, so people on the ground can also see the helicopter when they are flying and when they're passed. And this virtual reality flight simulator is also quite realistic in terms of the same software is used, or the software I speak about is the same software is also used in traditional flight simulators and certified in the United States. So the behavior of the machine of the helicopter is quite good. Theoretically, it's on the same level like a certified flight simulator. It's also really nice in terms of you can put it into service very quickly. So the setup is, because it's less hardware, it's very movable, very mobile. It's just plugging in something into your PC and then start a simulation, and then you can just start with that. Of course, it's also possible to scale it a bit. So till 10 or 12 helicopters in parallel in the same world working together is possible. You can connect all these flight simulators. And one further benefit is also you can do also some kind of reporting. So you can record the session. You can even record your movements, hand movement, what you did in the helicopter, but also your head movement. So you can also see, okay, the pilot looked at this place or the other place, and then switch back to the instruments in the helicopter, for example. This might be helpful if you analyze the session, or after all the things are done. As I mentioned, you can connect these flight simulator together, and you can it's extensible. You can also connect it to something else. So you could think about maybe to have a bigger system in place, so that you have one thing with a really good simulation of your fire, and then propagate the proper information into each of the simulated of the flight simulators, as well as to the ground forces. And you can for sure also have another dedicated place for the controlling, for the managing of all these things, which was mentioned before in the other session. The simulator I mostly used is also very open to extensions, so should not be too hard to change the landscape. So if you imagine, okay, you fly over the fire and now you try to extinguish it, then change the texture on the ground from burning to something else, or to have additional objects into this world, like, I don't know, whatever is needed, maybe artificial, or maybe cars or other special objects. And of course, you can also change the aircraft itself. For example, when you use sling load on a helicopter, they have sometimes kind of bulb in the window so that you can look downstairs to your sling load, so that you can place it correctly on the right place. When we look for Luftfahrtbundesamt, for example, they have also paper about specifications for certification things that you can say, okay, how good is my simulation and what can I achieve? What kind of certification I can achieve with that? You see here this table, and there are different types of simulation certification. And in most cases, also the virtual reality simulation could do or could achieve this recommendation or these how can you say that what's needed for the certificate, but with at least one exception. This is the control forces. Because when you use these 3D controllers in your virtual reality world, you do not have this force feedback, not the real force feedback you have in a real cockpit. But all the other things could be achieved. But I do not know right now that there is really a certified virtual reality flight simulator out there at the moment. You can also enhance this flight simulator if you want to have these movements or the feel of the G-forces to you. Then you can also add this to the flight simulator, like you see here the seat. But this reduces also the mobility a bit, and it's also increasing the cost a bit, but still not too expensive. So I talked all the time about the X-Plane 11. This is the virtual reality flight simulation. There's another very popular these days, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. There are, of course, some differences. The visual quality is better on the Microsoft Flight Simulator. Collision detection is as well a bit better. But the virtual reality implementation is at the moment more basic. It's only that it supports the headset, not the 3D controller within the world. So you can't touch your instruments with the 3D controller. For example, the switches and all the things in your helicopter. And last but not least, it does not support helicopters. At the moment, it only supports planes. But this is supported on the X-Plane. So these are my slides, and I can just show you a very short movie here. This is the X-Plane virtual reality flight simulation with a Bell 407, and there's also a simulated fire out there. This is a very, very basic fire simulation. The flight simulation is good, but the fire simulation is quite basic. But you can see there is already something, but it could be also improved a lot. But thanks to the open structure, the API possibilities on the flight simulator should not be a big problem to enhance it. Yeah. So nothing more. That's it from my side.